Hello, and welcome to the third episode of Character Witness. This one's going to be a little bit different this week. I am my own guest. So what's going to happen is we're going to talk about my characters. I've got both Ryan and Bill here to help with the questioning, just in case I don't ramble for like an hour about myself, which I want to do, as I love myself. So I'll cover the basic things. So I've been playing D&D for about 2-3 years now. I was never really that big on it growing up. I wasn't exposed to it until like a house party when I was like 14, and we fought some skeletons and got wrecked, and I was like and my next sort of exposure to it was just in like TV shows. There's always like a D&D episode of every like cult classic or whatever. Like you got the D&D episodes of Community and stuff like that. So I thought this looks fun. In terms of role playing, I've had quite a bit of experience with just like interactive forum-based role-playing, like we all used to be on the Resident Evil one that we used to do, where you sort of had to survive in like a city, and all like the different boards were set up as different sections of the city, which is quite interesting. Do
you remember the Final Fantasy VII roleplay?
Yes.
Oh, that's a throwback.
Yes, Advent Children.
You guys from FF7 roleplay.
What a time to be alive. Also, just stuff like X-Men, which really used to annoy me because I'd play, like, say, Nightcrawler to a T, and people were playing other X-Men way out of character. Like, why is the guy playing Cyclops making him really liberal and friendly where he's meant to be a strict man with a stick up his arse? Anyway, regardless, so that's my sort of background in roleplay. I decided to play D&D with my pals here because it just seemed like a fun thing to do. And yeah. So, the first character I ever made, who is still alive today, so you know,
Somehow.
Alright, rub it in.
is a half-orc barbarian named Flobbert. Now, you're probably thinking that's a really dumb name, and it is, and there's a reason for that. So, Flobbert's entire clan was brutally murdered. He doesn't know who by, he doesn't particularly care, he wasn't really old enough to like be traumatized by the passing of his family, he was literally a baby. He was a very quiet baby, so he wasn't like screaming while all the maelstrom was happening, so I imagine whoever attacked just didn't realize he was there. Once he grew big enough to like crawl, he just crawled off into the forest and came across an old man named Hans Dancer, Necromancer. Now, Hans was once okay at magic, and in his old age, he is extremely senile and thinks he's the greatest necromancer going. So he was trying to do some spells, and at the same time, Flobbert comes crawling along. So rather than any sane person would look at young Flobbert and say, "Ah, that's a baby half-orc," he instead thought it was a demon that he'd summoned. So he immediately adopted this demon as his protege or whatever, and named him Flobbert Bobbert because he's a senile old man and he's not really all there. So he raised this half-orc barbarian in a cave in the woods. So Flobbert, he raised him well, like as much as he was a necromancer, he wasn't particularly evil. So Flobbert's a pretty nice guy. And when he came of age, you sort of went off into civilization because he thought there must be life beyond this cave. But when he went to civilization, sort of started trying to mingle with people, he would get made fun of for his extremely stupid name. It was then he realized he had a terrible temper, and he would leave just bloodshed in his wake. And because he'd been raised quietly in the forest with a necromancer, but a well-to-do old man who really just sort of like pawed around, not doing anything overly violent, it terrified him. So he decided to become a pacifist. Now,
Oh god.
growing up in the forest, he can't read or write, and he wants to spread the word of pacifism. So instead of reading or writing and making pamphlets out of that, he draws pictures of good things, happy things like suns, flowers, and hands them out, and tries to talk to people about pacifism, and it never ends well. He's renewed his vow of pacifism around, I think at last count before he left the party, he was 59 times. It's probably up to like 70 now. Because every time he rages, he considers that a failure, so he needs to redo his vow of pacifism. Now, he left the current adventuring party to become a headmaster at an orphanage because he was under the impression that if he continued to adventure with the party, he would just keep getting into conflict and keep breaking his vow. So he hung up his axe, which is definitely only used for wood now, and he is a headmaster at an orphanage at a place called Astral Rock, and he's quite good at it. He's a big gentle giant. But yeah, that's Flobbert in a nutshell.
When you're talking about Flobbert and that he had almost like the craziest imaginable upbringing,
Yes.
how did you think of the idea of after all of that shit, after all the awful stuff that had happened, that Flobbert was going to be someone that was like tightly wound when it came to his name, but also like a really good-hearted pacifist at the same time?
It's partly because like Flobbert's entire existence is what I would like to call a happy accident. So like it's like all this like when he was young, like his entire family getting just wiped out. Like it never really affected him because he wasn't old enough to comprehend anything. I imagine he would have been traumatized if he was able to comprehend any of it. But no, he just one day his family wasn't there. He just crawled off. But when it comes to his name, because that's all he's known, like all he knows is being raised by this man in the woods, he thought his name was fine. And because of his blood, like he is a half orc and he comes from a clan of barbarians, he's never really had a reason to be annoyed. He's lived a quiet life with this old man who just doesn't really, like, as much as Hans Dancer was a necromancer, he wasn't really evil. He didn't have any grand plans to like open a portal for his patron or anything. He just wants to mess about, like just doing like little magic experiments. So he's really just being raised by a harmless old man. Well, I say harmless, he once defeated our entire party.
What a game that was.
But sort of like, yeah, like so do you like when he got angered by people making fun of his name, that was really the first time he realized he had it within him to like have that much rage, and sort of so from then on he's just sort of try to curb it because to him that's not his natural state after all these years of being like just quiet living in the woods, and now he's had to unleash this what could be described as a demon inside him, but it's just his nature really.
When I think of Flobbert as well, from like an outside perspective, I think of like a gentle giant, but also like a little bit of like Jekyll and Hyde, almost like that sort of
Yeah.
that switch that goes off in his head. Was there anything in particular that made you consider those kind of like tropes, or made you like consider that kind of personality?
No, honestly, the reason I made him a pacifist is because I didn't think I would care enough about Dungeons and Dragons to keep playing. My whole thing was because firstly I picked a barbarian because they're really simple to play. So I was like, all right, I'll not have to think about too much when creating the character. My mechanics are fairly simple, and also with this pacifist. I did end up using it, but not to like get out of D&D, just to get out of using Flobbert. I was like, if he's a pacifist, if I decide one day this isn't for me, I could just be like, my guy just doesn't agree with what the party's doing, he leaves forever. But it turned out to be a really good, and I did enjoy the game, and it turned out to be like a hilarious narrative tool. So it really wasn't with anything in mind, but it does reflect stuff like Jekyll and Hyde, and like sort of like characters like Wolverine or like the Punisher, who can be measured in combat, but like they get to a point where they just balls to the wall, let's just slap everyone's shit in. But yeah, it was originally just a backdoor for me to get out of Dungeons and Dragons in general.
You imagine if it's just like one day it's just like, Flubber's just considering being a pacifist forever. Okay, bye guys.
Didn't like the first session after the first combat. Yeah, it's in for me. Bye.
No, I don't think I like this rage mechanic. Bit too complicated.
When you're talking about that narrative, when you're talking about the interactions you had with the rest of the party,
Yeah.
What do you think were like the best interactions? What did you enjoy most about them? What didn't you enjoy about them?
Well, the only thing I would say I didn't enjoy was, well, not I didn't enjoy because I enjoyed the whole process, but like I think the only thing that Flobbert didn't enjoy about the party was sort of like they used to start combat without him even having the chance to promote pacifism. Like, say we would walk into somewhere, I'd be just about to open a dialogue with a bandit and someone would, like, shoot him with an arrow or some shit. And he'd just be like, oh, dear God. Or it would just be a case of outside of the party, someone would, like, hit him with an arrow and then he'd just go berserk. But the best thing about interacting with the party was he sort of had a quiet respect for Ren, because Ren's a paladin, even though he had a big fucking mace, hammer, can't remember which one Ren used, but like he would knock people's shit in. But overall, his calling as a paladin was to protect people, so he's more defensive rather than offensive. So he sort of like had a respect for him. He really liked Torrin, not morally, but just as a dependable, like just an ally, because there was that one session where we were trapped in some like underground place. We were fighting that plague dude who was like the first big like villain we really were pursuing, and there was that hallway where me and Torrin just had to hold off like a billion demons that were trying to like smash our back doors in. And like, as much as him as a character doesn't like knocking people's shit in or violence of any kind, the fact that he was able to hold his own like with his friend like for that long, and they both got out of it relatively unscathed, was, as much as he wouldn't like to admit it, it was thrilling to him to like have that. In terms of, well, let's talk about before we get on to the main antagonist, which is Devin. Let's talk about Sibo and Miscria. He liked Sibo in flashes because Sibo like was a good person at his core, but like again he would like fire off fireballs before Flobbert had a chance to do anything. He did admire the fact that Sibo is very protective over little animals, because Flobbert likes little animals and stuff, living in the forest. Miscria, he wasn't really sure what to make of Miscria. It was just like, because she came into the party a bit later on, she could shapeshift into things, and with her being a tiefling, like there's always going to be that sort of like, oh, I know what you are, with like his dad, well, his adopted dad being a necromancer. He's like, he's aware to a certain extent that she was demonic, so he wasn't really sure whether she was good. Like over time, he was fine with her, because like she proved her worth and stuff. But the first few sessions, he was like, that's the sort of stuff my hands deals in. I'm not really, you know.
Yeah.
And Devin was an insufferable cock. I think at the beginning he liked Devin a lot, because Devin was like, I'll teach you how to write and stuff. And it was sort of because Flobbert had such a genuine want to spread pacifism and a genuine want to learn, the fact that Devin took advantage of that and was making him write like rude words instead of what he was meant to be doing, and like making Flobbert look like a fool whenever he was trying to like sort of build bridges. And on the surface it's a very like funny like slapstick, oh, what's gonna get up next, but like when you think about it at a very base level, objectively, when you remove the humor, thanks to Devin's like cantankerous actions, Flobbert murdered a bunch of people that he shouldn't have murdered.
Yeah, I guess I never really thought
And
about
then
it. Like...
so when like just to give background to the people listening, every night Flobbert could do a check to see if he could comprehend language better as part of his, it was just like an in-game mechanic of just him just learning to read. And then it was quite a while because he didn't have much intelligence, and then when it finally clicked and he finally realized all of the stuff he'd been writing down was bullshit, because Devin was making him write words like penis and cock, very childish, but again it resulted in people getting murdered because no one would listen to Flobbert when he was trying to build bridges. He just snapped. He had these gloves that it was given to him by, I want to say, Devin, the flame gloves.
Yeah, the gloves of diplomacy.
Yeah.
And the way he used to keep track of his renewing his pacifist vows, he put notches on his axe to remind him not to use it again. But at this point, he just burned all of that part of the axe off, like, and then just went for a good few sessions. He was completely consumed by his rage, not fully barbarian rage, so he wasn't going around like swinging his axe. But he called Devin to his room, threatened him, threw him against the wall, and then from that point on, like during fights, if he could have saved Devin from something, he would not do it. He would have just like moved to help someone else. There was times where he would sort of try and orchestrate things so something would kill Devin. Like, so he would, if he saw something, like if two enemies were running towards him to get to Devin, he'd go for the one with more HP. So like he knew that one would take him longer to turn around and deal with the other one, because he knew that would have a chance to kill Devin. So he was very opposed to Devin for a long time, and then sort of when we got to the island where he would eventually retire to, he saw like the orphanage, and we were at a festival, the Frostvale Festival, I think it is. Something to do with that.
Yeah,
it was like a
sounds
winter
right.
festival. He sort of just sort of saw the kids like playing and stuff, and he used the kids to like play pranks on Devon, like to throw water balloons at him, and sort of like the children's like readiness to be silly and like just do whatever he said. He realized he had an influence because of his size
The
and his,
relationship he had with him, yeah.
yeah, and he was like, oh, like, and so he thought maybe I should be focusing my time on that rather than this hatred I have for Devon. So he just sort of told the party, look, I've had a word with the orphanage. I'm going to be the headmaster. Like, I can't really continue on this journey anymore. And that was the, well, not the end of Flubber, because we literally met him last session again, but that was like the end of his journey, because as much,
Being a player character.
and I think that was my fault, but like putting this back door on him. Eventually he was a character that was on a self-imposed timer, because like the whole breaking your vow, pacifism, renewing it, while funny and while like all right, it would have gotten really old if I'd kept him going for like a year.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So I
that's
think
fair.
so I think like moving on to another character was probably the best thing to do for Flobbert.
I never really thought about those people that Flobbert would have initially thought were irredeemable, and even though he had tried to, like you said, create a dialogue and trying
Yeah.
to get them to put down their weapons, and then it being the worst case scenario and the last resort of having to fight these people, I never thought about that kind of like ruining Flobbert's chances of getting a good sort of idea of pacifism, because none
Yeah.
of these guys were approachable about it, and
And
that
like
being all Devon's fault.
and I really wanted to, that's why like whenever he did like snap and he was killing people, pardon me, I used to make it as visceral as possible, just to show like the contrast between who he actually wanted to be and who who, because I didn't want him to be defined by his blood, but like, so like say like when he snapped, he was like digging his axe in the ground and just mashing people's faces against the flat bit until they died and shit like that, because he was just, I wanted it to be like a very stark contrast, just to like show that like what the fuck, like this guy is like going around, he's all about peace, but then he can do that to someone.
Unhinged,
And like,
yeah.
so the fact that like Devon's actions and like certain circumstances, or even not just Devon's actions, say like somebody who just flat out didn't want to listen to him would like fire an arrow at him, and sort of like, if none of those people had done any of those things, these terrible, visceral, horrible things wouldn't have happened to them. So it's like, don't poke the bear, basically, was the entire character of Flobbert. Just don't
Yeah.
poke the bear. So I had to sort of scale him back a bit, let him calm down. And just speaking with Mike about like Flobbert afterwards, because obviously you have to keep Mike updated on what I want Flobbert to be doing just in the orphanage. Like he'll not have had like any sort of opportunities to snap unless there was something going on and there was evil about and he needed to stop it.
I think it's a good point as well, because I think some people have troubles knowing whether to retire a character or when that character has like run its course.
Yeah.
Like you said, like there's only so many times that a character can, if they take pacifism really seriously, break that and renew that vow over and over again before you're like, well, something has to change. And being able to, set that aside for the good of the character, so it doesn't just become like a caricature almost, or um like a mockery of what you intended the character to be, I guess, kind of, is really important. Was there any points before you went to the orphanage that you thought about retiring the character, like earlier or later, perhaps? Or
No, I honestly thought Flobbert's end would be he'd finally get to the point where he couldn't stand Devon anymore, murder him in front of the party, then just get put down by everyone. Because I think there's an Avengers story called Avengers Disassembled, and like a bunch of bad shit happens to them right at the start. Ant-Man gets fucking vaporized, and then all the bad shit happening at the start makes She-Hulk go insane, and she murders Vision in how angry she is. She throws a fucking semi-truck at Captain America, beats Captain Britain into a pulp, and like they have to put her down. Like they don't kill her, but they just knock her out, because like someone has to stop her. I envisioned it being like that. Like Devon would just say that one comment. They would just be like, "That's it. I've had enough. I'm going to fucking kill you."
push him over the edge, yeah.
So that's how I thought it was going to be, but I found myself. I thought I would be a disservice to the character because I was like looking for like, oh, this is the session I'm going to snap, and like there was the comment never came, and it was sort of like me waiting for a reason, and then I thought like that's not good role play because it's not organic. It's just me like wanting the role play to fit my own motive. So once I thought like my characters now, I'm now considering my character's single story more important than what everyone else wants to do. I was like, he needs to retire, and so I thought I'd.
Yeah, and I think as well, like, I mean, Devon, you know, he knew how to push Flobbert's buttons, but he never would have intended for, you know, for his own safety, for Flobbert to just turn around and snap at him. So he knew to keep it at a certain level. And if Flobbert was waiting and waiting and waiting for him to go beyond that level, like it's going to end up becoming kind of what's the word, like manufactured almost, like
It would
so
have
yeah,
clearly
I think it was
looked
a good
like
move.
it'd been booked. If you want to use the rest of the terminology.
Yeah, it wouldn't have been a shoot.
So yeah, I like and it was also a thing of like Flower probably didn't want to murder Devon, like in his heart, because like as much as he hated him, like he is a pacifist and he's trying to fight against this rage inside of him, and it's sort of like he wouldn't want to murder one of the party in front of the rest of the party who he does consider his friends. Like as much as like he didn't react when Chaffinch returned and was like, "Oh, Torrent's dead." He's like, as much as he didn't react, like Flobber's just not a very emotional guy, but it probably would have cut him up. Like that's his like, for lack of a better, if anyone, when you look at the characters he interacted with, Torrent was his best friend. Like he didn't agree with anything that he wanted to do. Like his Torrent wanted to like smash people's windows, stab everything. Heresy is bad, whereas Flobbert, although he wasn't actually born of heresy, as far as he's concerned from what he's being told by his dad, he's been summoned from a fall. So like he is heresy, living heresy.
Yeah.
So he's like, but no, this is like, he's like, that's my best friend. And then like sort of, and I imagine that's the reason why there's still blood on his axe. Like as soon as he found out Torrent had died, he probably went out in the woods and just started fucking beating the shit out of deer or something. But, yeah.
It's a grim image.
I mean, it is, but like you guys travel with him. You saw like what he's capable of when he snaps. Like, you wouldn't be like, "Oh, beautiful deer." You would have been like, "My friend's dead." Ah.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah.
Just piggybacking off of the last comment about like retiring Flobbert.
Yeah.
On the flip side, so the world that we're currently playing in kind of suffered like a bit of an apocalypse. There's a lot of crazy stuff that happened.
Yeah.
If touch wood, Chaffinch lives forever. But if anything ever happens to Chaffinch, do you think he would ever revisit Flobbert, maybe like write a bit more into his story, or are you happy with just leaving him where he is? Like, do you think that's him done forever now?
No, I think he's still got fighting him if needed. I think like say Touchwood, Chaffinch gets killed next session. I think just because of the proximity, because we're on the island where Flobbert lives, he would pick up his axe and he'd join the party again. He'd be like, right, I'm gonna fucking just kick everyone's shit in because my son's dead. Yeah. However, if it was sort of like, say, if like we a few more sessions, we're on the other side of the world, I'd have him replaced. I'd have to replace Chaffinch with the other character in his family, Starling, because it just makes more sense because he's also an adventurer, whereas Flobbert can't leave the orphanage. But I think if it happened like on his doorstep in Astral Rock, he probably would join the party again. So.
I have a question about Flobbert. So in that 2-year time skip where we had the good guys lose pretty much, does Flobbert have any remorse about, you know, not being there for, you know, when the party lost? Or did you think he was doing what his like correct calling was by being at that orphanage and protecting kids from what could have been, you know, a very different world in that 2-year time frame?
I don't think in the 2-year time frame he knew, because Astral Rock's very like, even before the lockdown when everything happened, it's very secluded, it's very keep to our own type thing, as much as Flobbert isn't of that mindset because he likes to talk to new people and be like, hey, have you heard about pacifism, lads? He wouldn't have known. Like the first, like I said, like the first inkling he had that his friends were dead was when Chaffinch returned and told him. So I imagine he does now, but not for the entire 2 years. I think that's also just a case of him not knowing, but I think he definitely feels like he could have helped protect people, because for his entire time, I don't think Flobbert went down once. Like, he never got knocked out. He was always the one still standing, so I think he probably thought he was a vital element that could have turned the tide, even though he probably wouldn't have judged it by it, because I wasn't there when everyone died, but it sounded like a fucking bag of shite. Yeah. But no. So yeah, like Flobbert, I think Flobbert still got some of an arc to have, but I think it's as a supporting character, not as. I don't think I'd ever bring him back like fully.
Yeah, I agree with that. Like, I think there's still a lot of stuff for him to do, but that's as like as a character in the background on like Astral Rock and that sort of thing.
Yeah, if the world
Also,
wasn't pardon me, if the world wasn't fucked, I was gonna have him help Ruff's village, just like send a bunch of orphans and himself over to help build everything, and then sort of like merge the two schools together. Just sort of thinking like
man.
that's something that would be real nice in my opinion.
We start going into the industrial age, and now Flobber's supplying the child labor. We're trying to be good.
Nothing like that.
It's horrible.
Very like simple things for the children to do. He doesn't want to put them in danger.
Yeah, that does sound like a nice wrap up. We'll get there by the end of the campaign.
Hopefully.
We'll finally make a village.
So yeah, I think that's it for Flobbert, unless Mike wants to use him for anything. But I think I'm having much more fun playing the Chaffinch. So we'll go on to the Chaffinch, my beautiful boy. So the Chaffinch comes from Astral Rock, which is where Flobbert retired to. And although Flobbert is his dad now, they didn't know each other at the time when he joined the party. So what happened was, Chaffinch was an orphan who never got adopted. He doesn't know his parents. He doesn't really care. He's similar to Flobbert. Like, he doesn't have that trauma of like never having a mother and father. Like, it's not something, because he's never been around, so he's never had to consider it. Nobody adopted him because it's a pretty small community, and the orphans are well taken care of for the most part. But he got to the age where they couldn't keep him at the orphanage anymore because he was like a young adult. So they gave him a house. It wasn't much. It was only a little house, like a state-owned house type thing. Probably like the Astral Rock equivalent of like a council house. So he lives in there, and because he spent like the last 17 years or so like just playing with other kids and fucking about in the forest, to get his like, because he never really grew up, so to get his thrills and stuff, he steals things. So he's like burrowing into people's houses, even though he calls himself the Chaffinch, which is a bird.
Yeah.
Stealing things, and that's how like even though they didn't know it at the time, they got their first glimpse of him when you went into the guard station to get that item, and like there was a hole in the ground and it was gone. It was just because Chaffinch saw it was shiny and wanted it. He didn't know what it did or anything, so he just took it. And then, but he's the worst criminal in his initial state because he likes to boast about like how good he is at everything. So immediately after he stole that thing, he fires his massive flare gun at his house, like, because he's got a flare gun which pops and it makes a big bird pattern in the sky that looks nothing like a Chaffinch, but it's just a general bird thing that he had made by his granddad, Hans, who didn't know it was going to be his granddad at the time, but like Flobbert had it on him. So what happens is the party, who don't know what to do next because he just figured out the mystery. Torrin almost died. it's
did die.
Yeah, it's some downtime. They see just an intriguing bird pattern in the sky, and they meet the Chaffinch in his little shitty shack, and immediately the only person in the party likes him is Sibo. Because they're very similar. They're very loud. They love to boast about their feet and stuff. And yeah, so Chaffinch joins the party and immediately is just in over his head. He's never left Astral Rock in his life. He doesn't believe dragons exist or monsters or anything. The only evils he's ever had to deal with are like guards running away from them. Particularly scary forest animals like bears and stuff. But with him being a wood elf, he's usually like hopping through the trees, so he doesn't really have to deal with it. Basically, he has this idea of himself, which is nothing like who he is. So he's very brave to begin with because he doesn't realize the amount of danger that's actually out there. All he hears is, this group of adventurers are down one member. I can fill that. I've got nothing to do. Yeah.
This is my calling.
This was meant to be like in times where people need a hero steps up. This is my turn. So he just hops on this adventure, and in the first conflict he gets into, he's immediately knocked out by a dragon, or a baby dragon. Sorry.
It was a wyvern, I think.
Yeah. And so he wakes up after the fight. He's not resurrected. He's brought to, and he's like, this is clearly a man in a suit using pyrotechnics, because he's aware of magicians, and like people who use like, and those like suits where people dress up in. There's like 7 of them, like to make like a dragon. It's usually made of paper mache and stuff like that, and parades and stuff. So he goes to take off the head of this thing to reveal who's underneath, and he pulls, and it's just like muscle and viscera underneath, and he's immediately just starts vomiting. And he's like, oh, what the fuck's going on? Oh god, I can't do it. And then, so then when we go to fight the brass dragon, he's just, which was a couple of sessions afterwards, or maybe it was an immediate session afterwards, he stays his distance, doesn't go in close at all, just throwing pinions at it from afar because he's terrified. And he didn't think any of this shit was real. Ren goes down in the fight. He thinks he's seen a guy die in front of him. And then the party manages to resurrect Ren from the dead. So in the space of around 2 to 3 days, this kid, who is the most fearless dude on Astral Rock, has realized dragons are real and death is meaningless. So he immediately becomes depressed, and basically, for those listening, he started off as like a very loud person going, "I'm the Chaffinch." That's not a chaffinch noise, by the way. He's never actually seen a chaffinch in his life. He just saw it in one of those bird watching books in the community library and just liked the look of it. And then from that point, he's just speaking like this for the rest of. So he doesn't want to do anything. He doesn't want to interact with anyone. Everything's just terrifying, and he sort of like just goes into autopilot for the longest time. And then he sort of finds comfort next to Sibo and Ren, because Sibo's still as loud as he ever was. So that gives him confidence. And Ren, just because Ren's the healer, and now he knows death is a very real possibility, sort of like a little bit scared for his life. But also, he knows if he doesn't protect Ren, he can't be revived. So he's like, better keep this guy fine. So yeah, and then he just went on autopilot for a while, and he was not clinically, there's no clinics in D&D, but he was just categorically just depressed for a good 7 sessions until the session where he split from the party, because in real life I was moving house and stuff, I was busy for a long time, so I couldn't play for a while, and we were tracking down a bad guy, and then there was sort of like a moral dilemma where we need to get this information out of this guy, but everyone was saying, oh, well, not everyone, but half the party was saying we should kill him afterwards in case he goes and tells anyone. Whereas me, Ren, and surprisingly Sibo, who sometimes goes along with those things, was like, no, that's not, because this dude was fucked. He's like, we've got his information. He wasn't really anyone important. He was just like a scrub who was delivering like information. So we're like, I think he's had enough. Like, if he knows that we beat the shit out of him, he'll know it'll happen again if he continues. Like, you should turn his life around, or at least give him a chance to. And then Devin agreed. He was like, yeah, of course, and then went over and then just slit his throat anyway. And that enraged Chaffinch. So he comes out of this sort of like, and he wasn't particularly vocal in the argument to begin with. He was just like, no, I agree with Ren, because he sees Ren as like, is absolutely correct on all things, because Chaffinch has a very Captain America view of everything. He's like, this is right, this is wrong. Same as Ren. So like he sided with him, and then to have Devin sort of deceive him like that, because
undermine it, yeah,
because Chaffinch never got on with Torrin. Torrin tried to kill him on the boat over to their first adventure, and Chaffinch just thought it was a jovial trick and backflipped over and was like, haha, Mishkria sort of was tired of him the first time he spoke. But Devin was sort of like neutral to him. Like Devin was also like thought he was a bit of an idiot, but he wasn't like malicious to him. And he wasn't trying to fuck with him like he did with Flobbert. So he like didn't have any negative views of Devin until that point, because he thought like this idea that he had of this guy, because Devin was quite impressive to him because he could do like little bits of magic and stuff like that. And it was during that point where Devin sort of like found a bit of courage, because Flobbert wasn't looming over him anymore, and he was willing to get into the fight. And he had that sword that was like talking to him, if I remember, or was doing something to him. It could like give him fear or something.
Yeah, that was one of Devon's things, is that he could.
So he's willing to use that, and like he was getting a bit more stuck in. So he just thought like Devon was a cool adventurer, and then to have him like just suddenly just change entirely and cut this dude's throat. And while Chaffinch didn't know that was Devon's nature, like that was all he knew. So he's like sort of like, how the fuck could you do this? And sort of kicked him in the face and just left. And that's when we all went on hiatus.
Just before we speed into like the time skip section, I just wanted to roll back a little bit.
Yeah.
Because you were saying about how you saw how Chaffinch saw the Chaffinch in a book and stuff.
Yeah.
I was wondering, so obviously he's kind of got like a bit of a superhero like feel about him.
Yeah.
And I was just wondering, how did you come up with the initial, superhero persona and then instantly into just the dilemma of being way out of his head, having like a lot of grief with finding out monsters are real. Was that something you planned from the start, or was this just did this just naturally come up and you thought it'd be fun to do at the time?
Initially, just on a very simple level, obviously it's me. I love superheroes. So having a guy in D&D who believes he's a superhero is hilarious. But I think the transition point was just the Chaffinch is just entirely me. He's based on me. Like it was sort of like, it was at a time, like, not to get super serious, but it was a time in my life where I just wasn't very happy. So I was just using D&D as a form of like, it was just a free therapy for me. So like it was sort of like I'd been very happy for a good 19 years, I want to say. Life was like, a few bad things happened, but bad things happen to everyone. And then like sort of 2015 16 onwards, I was just hit with depression, and it was just a horrible thing that I didn't fully understand. So sort of like I wanted to give it's sort of like I'd already gotten past it for the most part, but it was a case of like Chaffinch was my way of like vicariously living through someone who had the chance to go back and handle it better. And sort
that
of
makes
like
sense, yeah.
So for me, as like for someone who had the majority of their life be cool and chill, everything went right. I mean, I'm poor as shit, but I was always happy. Like I had like nothing wrong with my family. I had lovely upbringing, all that stuff. But then like once things start just dropping around you, it's like, oh, what the fuck? Like it's more I feel it was more of a contrast for me suddenly going on the dip of a roller coaster, whereas I probably might have been able to handle it better if that had been my constant state. I don't know, but that's just my experience. So like to have it, I could only really react to trauma as the Chaffinch, as how I would in real life, as like I become very quiet and closed off, which is entirely not me for the most part. Like I'm a loud idiot bimbo man, so
Somebody quote that.
So it was just that really, and sort of like just using that just to live vicariously through someone, just sort of like, because I feel like the way I handled my initial depression and stuff like that was terrible in real life, so I thought like I'll do better with Chaffinch, but also not shying away from things that were very real to me, because I'm always very, for the first half of what I was going through, didn't want to talk to anyone about it, but I find it's a lot easier when you do talk to people about it. So being able to like just fully express that through a character is fine, and like even to this day, Chaffinch is terribly traumatized by everything, but I think that's an integral part of his character now, because like he doesn't really hide it anymore. Like he's very open about it. So that was sort of like
overcome.
Yeah, the inspiration behind it was just like what I was dealing with, and also I like superheroes.
But to be fair, a lot of people have said that like D&D and just roleplay games in general are very good for like working out emotions that you normally keep bottled up. So it's like a safe environment to work for it.
Yeah, and it's sort of like a lot of Chaffinch's fears are my own fears. So after the time skip, all of his friends died, and he couldn't keep them safe. So like when Ryan's question earlier about like how did Flobbert feel about not being able to save his friends, like Flobbert was removed because he was in like a sheltered area, like where there's not much news got in or out. Whereas Chaffinch had to confront it head on because he lives in the world. He doesn't live like as soon as he could leave Astral Rock, he took the chance because like life's boring there. So he sort of like he first found out like after that arena fight, like when he returned, and he was just like he ran away from the party. He helped on Whimsdale for a bit. They just started like entering like fighting in kung fu competitions and stuff, just because it was one of his hobbies to become like the best fighter, to make him a better superhero. And then he's like, oh, Miscria's here, where's everyone else? He's like, oh, they're dead, holy shit. Because he was like in his timeline, he'd only just left Sibo. Like he was like, all right, are you going back to the party? Don't feel like I can. It's gonna be a bit awkward with Devon. I'll go over here. I'll see you later. And then he never saw him later.
Yeah, it's weird to think about, because that was actually like a month and a half in game where you just full on went into like, I don't want to say sidekick mode, but it was full on.
Yeah.
Because we did, just so people watching know, we did like spreadsheets where we'd message our dungeon master about what we want to achieve, and you were very much in the I want to help out Whimsy, help out Sibo and stuff. I think the only thing that we actively did was Sibo helped teach you how to talk to birds a bit better.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's very much you just went into like, little brother help mode, and then all of a sudden, like a month and a half of friendship is just gone, like in an instant.
Yeah,
But,
and like a part of it is sort of like he was the group's little brother. He was annoying. He's like insufferable at times, but like he never got to be the little brother long enough to learn anything of note. So like that was part of the conflict when he found out everyone was dead. Like he was like, I want to continue their legacy, but I don't. They didn't teach me enough to know how to do it, and that's why he just starts whenever something scary happens. He's still scared of dragons. Whenever there's like a dragon or worm-like creature, he stays at the back. He vomits. He's just he's in a horrible like place in terms of remembering his friends, and like he wants to do right by them, but he doesn't know how. And sort of like, so the only way you really can rationalize it is he's trying his best to keep everyone safe. And we saw it in the session where we were trapped in that alternate dimension and that giant fucking creature was floating towards us. He put himself between it and Mishkria. Like, he wouldn't have been able to do anything. But, like, it's just that instinct of, like, I can't let anybody else die. And I think that's detrimental to him because he's willing to just fucking die now at a moment's notice. And not because he wants to die, but because he part of it is he can't rationalize losing more people, and he thinks that he isn't as important as everyone else because his entire arc is sort of like, I want to emulate all the people I admire, but they're dead. Now I have this new group of people who I admire who are probably more important than me. I need to facilitate them doing all the great things they do, and if that means I have to fucking die, then I've got to fucking die.
Following from that, this is from like the outside looking in, so feel free to correct me, but we did a section where we went to the Feywild to help out a character that our friend David plays called Sid.
Yes.
He had like a journey. Yeah, I feel like because obviously like Chaffinch having trauma has never been too hidden because obviously it came out in like the second or third session where Chaffinch was part of the group. I always felt like the Feywild was really big for the Chaffinch because it felt like some Silent Hill dream sequence where you kind of had to face a lot of fears. Yeah. And like there were moments where you're having like proper breakdowns and stuff. I was just wondering, was that your plan going into the Feywild, or did you want to do this beforehand or afterwards? Did it just feel like a good time to work through it a bit more? Because I feel like that was a really big section where Chaffinch, like his personality, I don't want to say changed, but he definitely got a lot stronger in how to deal with things and how to let things go.
Yeah, because so it wasn't my plan to do anything in the Feywild. It was just Sid's story, and I was like, okay. But like there was so many sections in the Feywild to deal with like sacrifice and stuff, and that's now Chaffinch's character. So like especially the bit where there was that large stone door to get through to finally meet the people that Sid, the red elves that Sid needed to talk to find his family and stuff like that. And it was like, sacrifice all your memories. And that was Chaffinch nearly had a heart attack because he was like, I can just get rid of all these memories. I can stop feeling this way. I'll be fine. And then Sid sort of went, no, that's fine, and did it really quickly. And that's why he hung behind and tried to talk to, just for context for the listeners, there was also a red cap mushroom sort of type being who could like fulfill people's wishes to a certain extent, but it came at like great cost. And we just dealt with him to reveal the door. And it was sort of like, because Chaffinch missed his chance to get rid of all this conflict inside of him, which would have been the coward's way out for him. But he was reaching, like he'd just seen like spectral versions of his friends, not once, but you would see them again later on before the big battle with that demon, like which is, so I'll circle back to this point, but it's stuff to do with because he's half monk and he's like, well, not half monk, he's like 9/10 monk and 1/10 mystic, and that was a big mistake for him, and I'll circle back around for that. But like, so he missed that, and then he sort of like lingered behind on the door and was like, Mr. Red Cap dude, can you bring my friends back from the dead? And then the Red Cap said something cryptic, which was along the lines of yes, but it would have been like a caveat or something, like they wouldn't have come back. It would have just been like some sort of like trick, you know how like let's take Ghost Rider for example. Like when he's like, "Oh, if you save my dad from the crash today, I'll become the spirit of vengeance." And his dad survives a crash and dies of cancer like 2 days later. It's like it would have been something like that. So he managed to no, it's not worth it, and just went in. But what happening in the Feywild, and what still happens now, but because he's sort of like that experience has strengthened him. He went off to the Mystics, which was never his destiny. That was meant to be Flobbert's, because the monks for that specific school approached Flobbert because their powers in this particular world sort of lean towards pacifism. It's using mysticism to protect and preserve things.
Oh. That's super interesting. So I just remembered that Flobbert was visited by him.
During the time skip, where Flobbert went back to the island and was when Chaffinch went back to the island, was adopted by Flobbert. He got to know him, learned about all of his adventures with the party, and he was like, "Oh, and I got given this leaflet one time." So all that Chaffinch saw was like, "Oh, leaflet, more powers. I'm gonna be able to protect my friends better if I have more powers." Went off. Sort of learned everything, but because it's a very mind-based thing, it's telepathy, it's psionics and stuff, to do that to someone who already has a large amount of trauma, he now sees Sibo every now and then. When he talks to himself, he's not talking to himself, he's talking to Ren and Sibo. They're not actually them, but he thinks it's them, and they don't lead him astray. It's not some weird demonic versions of them. It's stab Ruff in the back. It's whatever he thinks they would say to him. So Ren's always saying stuff to him do the right thing and all that stuff, because Chaffinch, he went from being a really positive young kid to being extremely traumatized to having this insurmountable quest to protect every living thing now. And now he's just not all there. He's just not all there. He's not a sane person anymore. But I think he hides it well, because he thinks it's just part of the power. But I think if anyone ever sort of told him there's something not right with you, and you had to confront it, I think that would be the point where he just sort of crack, and sort of, I think one more traumatic event and it's not going to go well for him. But I think he bolstered himself when he found Sibo's possessions and made a bandana out of Sibo's cloak and stuff, and found Conker, because that's he's a very sentimental person. He's anchored in everything that's happened in his past, so he's sort of just stuck on all those things. But yeah, so he's had a very bad time, and he keeps up appearances now. He's no longer depressed. He's very happy and jovial. He's having fun and stuff. But that's because he thinks he's okay, but he's definitely not.
When you're talking about these past traumatic events that have definitely affected him, one of them seems finding out that the previous party had died. Were there any other big events that changed him? So we talked about the dragon and that sort of thing, where he's found out the world is a lot bigger than just Astral Rock. Are there any others that were big defining moments for him?
Yeah, I think the first time where we were just fucking about in that section of the Feywild where there was a bunch of demons. They weren't evil demons. I mean, they weren't to an extent, but they were peaceable and they were talking to us. And they had that village with the mushroom people who used to eat their own people. Okay.
Right.
But when the Death Knight, who'd murdered most of his friends, as soon as he saw him, he's just sort of anchored his resolve in. That was the part in the Feywild which sort of solidified I'm not going to take the easy way out, because he's I can see my end goal. I'm going to kill that guy.
Yeah.
And I think he'd stop at nothing to do it. It's sort of, and he doesn't realize the danger that he's in, because he talks shit to the guy and threatens him, but not knowing that this guy's extremely powerful, he just sees him as an obstacle that he needs to, because to him the biggest danger he could be in is fighting a dragon, and his family, the party's overcome it before, so he's not that worried, and he's also doesn't mind dying. So but I feel the worst end possible for the Chaffinch is him getting to the point where he confronts that guy and he can't get the job done. Even if I think it'd be even worse for him if he survived.
It would be pretty nasty.
Yeah, it would be
have that entire journey and then come up short still.
Yeah. So
it still might happen, guys.
Yeah. No, that's why I made it. That's why I made, because if you look at him, he's not the biggest guy around. He's not the strongest. He doesn't have much HP for a monk. So it's sort of like he'd stand no chance if he tried to do a one-on-one fight with this guy, but he would try it, and that's the scary thing because like he's made of paper mache. Okay, so we'll go on to look at my character sheet because Chaffinch is a strange fellow with a lot of decks.
Too much decks. Wow.
That's
You
a
can never have
ridiculous
too
amount
much
of
decks.
Yeah,
Dex
my
is
character sheet
so
currently
good in
says
fifth
11,
edition.
but he's level 12, so...
Man, just having a flick through.
Hell
Well, you got
What's
16
interesting-
strength.
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
gonna say normally if you go for monk, it's usually an either or. You pick a strength or a dexterity. You only benefit from having one high. So what made you choose, to be so physically gifted?
I think it was just for his background. It was like just a fella thing because he's very strong and fast. Just because all he spends his time doing is running through trees and stuff, and it's just a case of when I initially made him, I wanted him to have enough strength to like restrain people because I had this sort of like grappler thing in mind. But then the more I played him, I was like, it doesn't really fit his archetype. Like if somebody's loud and boisterous, the last thing they're gonna want to do is sort of like grapple with people. They'd be a more finesse based person.
Yeah.
And but strength is sort of like the reason why I wanted it that high also is because I wanted him to be sort of like a Spider-Man type character. So like when you think of Spider-Man, you think of agility, but like say if a building falls on him, like he can power out if he really wants to.
Yeah.
So it's just like classic street level superhero stats, like a Daredevil or a Spider-Man type dude, because he hasn't got any like special training until he like joined the Mystics, so that wasn't until he was like level 9. So like he's just all could really train himself with was whatever he had around him, and yeah, charisma is at an 8 because he's insufferable. While he is very talkative and very loud, that sort of makes him abrasive rather than endearing, unless he meets someone like Sibo who's similar to him.
Mm-hmm. And was that the reason why you've took like no like charisma proficiencies? Because I always thought he might have like a maybe like a persuasion proficiency or something like that. So even though he's boisterous and loud, he might still be able to convince someone through his good deeds or through
No,
honesty.
because he's so arrogant. When he does do something good, it sort of like removes any sort of credibility he has right away. So like, say if you were wearing a bag in the street, somebody ran past, snatched it, somebody stopped them, and the entire time they were giving you the bag back, they're like, wow, that was great, wasn't it? Did you see me do that? That was fucking amazing. Wow, aren't I good? You'd be like, yeah, mate, thanks. You wouldn't be endeared to that person. You'd say thank you,
Yeah.
obviously. You'd be thankful that they did it, but you wouldn't really trust them, and you'd be like, it would just be annoying. So he is that type of person. He's not that way much anymore. He sort of uses his arrogance to try and inspire confidence, even though he's been coloured by the group or by both groups as just being overly loud and not really knowing what he's doing, which is fairly true for the most part. But yeah, so the reason why I didn't put anything in charisma is because I didn't want him to be like this all-purpose guy who can do backflips, charm the pants off everyone. I want him to have a very real like setback, and it is his need for validation. Because if you look at his overarching story, like he's trying to protect his friends and all that stuff, but it's really also just for him because he doesn't feel safe without a group around him. So like everything is for his ends. So he's a little bit selfish. He's got a good heart, but like he won't admit it. But like most of the things he does is for himself, and that sort of makes him a bit abrasive. So I really wanted to put all his proficiencies in like his physical things because he spent his time alone in the woods, just like training and stuff. So he's not going to be very good with people.
Also, I know that 5th edition intelligence isn't really needed much, but I've seen it straight at default 0. Did you ever consider dropping it lower or taking any more? Was there a character choice behind that?
No, he's got just the baseline intelligence because like he's got a very standard, as much as they could cobble together, education from the orphanage. Like they didn't teach how to read and write because I feel like in a fantasy world it's not as important. It's very upper class thing to be able to do is read and write. I feel like in fantasy settings, like like a ramshackle orphanage on an island, while their intentions are good, and it's not an orphanage ever treat anyone bad, they're not gonna have like the budget to have loads of quills and stuff and teaching people how to read and write. So they really just taught them like just the basics of life, like what you need to do. Like he's all right with mathematics, but he's not like a scribe or anything.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It's more like fantasy knowledge. Like he knows basic things about local religions and stuff, how farming works, even though like he's not a farmer himself. And like he likes chaffinches. He's never encountered one. He doesn't know how to. He didn't know at the time how to read the word chaffinch. He had to like take the picture of the bird from this bird spotting book to the librarian. He's like, "What's this thing?" And he's just sort of patting himself on that. But yeah, so
I have a question.
Yeah.
If all right. So just to piggyback off what you were saying about him being a little bit selfish, and a big part of the Chaffinch's personality is wanting to get revenge on the Death Knight, like you said, and making sure that the Death Knight gets killed sort of at any cost.
yeah.
Is part of that for getting revenge for the party that got killed? Is part of that to do with him not being there to protect them when they died?
It's both really. Like it would be all of the things that led him to this point culminate in the demise of the Death Knight or his own demise. Like if he defeats the Death Knight, he proved he was stronger than whatever killed his friends. So he's doing them a service by one, avenging them, and two, becoming something in the world that's strong enough to defeat something that could have defeated his friends who he thought were amazingly powerful. So he feels like he's the thin line between chaos and order, which is extremely arrogant to think when you think about it. And also, like, it's for himself, because if he believes if he kills this guy, all the bad things going on inside his head will instantly go away. And they won't, which hopefully he'll get to find out.
That'll be some nice post-game trauma.
He's sort of
Does
like,
he think it'll like make up for not being there, the first time when they all got killed by the Death Knight?
yeah, that's well, he's a character that's just shackled by an immense amount of guilt. That's why whenever he sees, like, when people try and play on, like, any, like, sorcerers and stuff try and sort of summon astral versions of his friends and stuff, it immediately affects him, because, like, it hits him like a truck. He's just full of guilt at all times. He doesn't feel like he deserves to be the one that survived, even though he technically didn't survive the conflict. He wasn't even in it. But, like, he thinks because he had one, like, his entire friend group died because he had one disagreement with Devon. And that's why even when he goes back and speaks to Flobbert, he'll have jokes about like how they both hate Devon, but he won't. If you'll notice, he won't speak too lowly of him, because he keeps bringing up the fact that like neither of them would be able to read if it wasn't for Devon. So he's very, although like even the party members that he didn't get on with, he values them. Like they protected him. Like as much as Torrin didn't like him, like he had his back in a fight, and like they fought wars together. They stormed a keep together. And I remember like when Chaffinch was still in the party with Torrin, it was that string where Torrin just couldn't catch a break on like landing hits and stuff. So I was like dancing around him, catching arrows and shit. Like he doesn't care like if someone doesn't like him, because he knows as much as like someone in the party might hate him, they have to deal with the fact that Chaffinch is a very skilled person. And if he can save someone's life and then rub it in their face, he'll absolutely do it.
Just to roll us back a little bit to the stats, because I was just looking for your skills list. I've seen you've got medicine, nature, and religion down.
Yeah.
Nature makes sense to me. Like, there's probably more to it, obviously, with studying the chaffinch and training in the woods.
Yeah.
I was wondering what sparked medicine and religion as well. Was there flavor behind that?
Yeah. So the religion part of it is just because locally, I think I can't remember which god is the one that Astro Rock practiced to, but he's just aware of it, just being in the orphanage, and I can't remember which one of my background things means I had to take that or something that didn't make sense, and I feel like just because of the person he is, and he's why he got attached to Ren so much, was because in most religions, or at least most religions he would have been exposed to, it would have had a very clear moral code. It would have had a good sense of right and wrong, what you should do, what you shouldn't, which is something he needs, because he needs to know like what he's got to fight for. And in terms of medicine was just a part of his childhood, really. The reason why I put that down is because he'd be running, like, for all intents and purposes, he's just an idiot kid to begin with. So he'd be doing all that stuff, like falling out of trees, like, getting his friends to do it. His friend will, like, break an arm or something, you'd have to, like, sort of improvise a splint to, like, keep the... So just, like, getting himself into trouble, and in the latter part of his life, before he left on the adventure, he was living on his own. So, like, he was in charge of his health and stuff, and going out at night and, like, trying to steal things and trying to fight quote-unquote crime, or just, like, annoy the guards and stuff. He would have got bumps and scrapes, so he would have just had to fix himself up. Because if the guards had, like, stabbed someone in the arse who was, pardon me, trying to steal something, and then he turns up at the physician like, I've been stabbed in the arse, you'll obviously know it's him who's stolen whatever. So he sort of has to be self-sufficient to an extent. So that's why I put medicine down.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. It's cool.
Yes. So yeah, that is the Chaffinch. Any more questions before we move on to the final section?
I have one question.
Yes.
In all of your characters, seemingly they've been a part of one big extended family. So Flobbert and
The
Hans,
lineage.
Danza, and Chaffinch and Starlin. What was the conscious decision like behind it? Or did it just sort of like spiral sort of out of control?
No, it's actually very premeditated, because the type of media I always consume, and the type that compels me the most, is media with a through line. So, like, comics that date back to, like, the 60s and stuff, they still have an influence on what's happening today. And I'm very big into teams. My favorite comics are X-Men comics, because I just like the idea of people coming together, working together, the bonds between people. So having a lineage in the game means, like, even if my entire party wipes, I still have an anchor that keeps me on the world. And if you look, it looks like chaotic from the outside, because it starts off with a necromancer in a forest who thinks they summon this half-orc. Half-orc becomes an orphanage patron, and then adopts this wood elf who and also adopts this half-elf who has listened to all the stories about the parties that Flobbert and Chaffinch have told him, and modelled himself on Ren and Sibo. That's why he's a sorcerer with a massive shield. And then you've got No, who was a little gremlin character we encountered in the Feywild, who, just as a result of the trauma that the Chaffinch had from not being able to protect people, sees this helpless little gremlin thing as like, I must protect it. And then because he was protecting it for so long, he got attached to it and decided to adopt it. And then, because he thought he did a good job being a dad for like the 5 seconds he thought it'd be a good idea to give Conker a No to take care of. And it's sort of like, I was fascinated by the idea of making a lineage that looked entirely chaotic and had the most minimal effect on the world, but meant the world to the Chaffinch.
Yeah.
Because I didn't want to go, oh, my bloodline's the greatest in the entire game. We come from kings and stuff, and then Mike has to acquiesce to my made-up bloodline for his plot. I wanted to make a legacy that means absolutely nothing to anyone but me.
Just as a side note, it's kind of, I approached Sibo and Ruff in the same way, who we talked about in the last session. There's something really fun about being so far removed from the main plot, but feeling like your character has like a long line of history that means nothing to most people, apart from like their own family.
And I've always just liked the idea that none of them are actually related. It's just like people who like come together and they form bonds strong enough that they want to be part of a family. In this case, that's the central part of Chaffinch's characters. He considers his party his family as well. And it's sort of like, I really like the idea that we can touch all areas of the world all over. Like, we'll go to some random place and there'll be this artifact that looks like something that Hans might have done something with. The monks that approach Flobbert live on some other island all the way out, but Chaffinch has also been there. it's just things like that. Like everything I consume, I enjoy a consistent like universe. Like even when I watch wrestling, my favorite novels are the Romance of the Three Kingdoms, which spans like so many years of Chinese history and all the families and all the lineages and stuff like that. I just find that fascinating. I don't like the idea of just like plonking a character down and then if they die, like that's it. That's just nothing. Like I don't want them to be the most important thing to ever happen to Mike's campaign, but it's nice to like have those little lore things every now and then.
Would be like rooted in the environment and stuff as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of lore stuff as well, so he was just saying about obviously like the family lineage. Have you planned much stuff with what Hans Dancer has done with his life, or is it very basic and you've just left it up to Mike to mess around with things? Like, do you feel like he's been all over the place, or do you feel like he has lived in a cave all of his life?
No, he's only really been on the central continent where his cave is. Like he's travelled all around that land. He's never been at sea. He doesn't trust the ocean. I think that's where his patron lives. Like it's a very Cthulhu type. So he's scared of his own patron, so he doesn't want to go anywhere near the water. But no, I think the only other thing he's affected, which hasn't got anything to do with the family, was that one shot where I made that serial killer bloke who had that hex tech on. That Hans had like, it's got Hans' signature on it, like he made it.
It's all connected.
Yeah, because I like to connect to nearly all my characters. I just find it hilarious. That something that Hans has made is accidentally well, it's not it's premeditated for that guy to kill people, but Hans wouldn't have made it to kill anyone because he's, as much as he is crazy, he's not evil. But yeah.
Nice.
Sexy.
So the only thing we have to discuss now is the future, whether I have any sort of characters planned. And I have 2 characters planned, which I think will be hilarious. The first one is sort of like, it's sort of subconsciously, I didn't realise I'd stolen this idea, but it was definitely stolen when it was pointed out to me. But Laura was talking about making a private eye character for that GTA No Pixel thing, that online role-playing GTA thing. So I was like, I got that in the back of my head, like private eye. So I had this idea to make this half fairy dude. I would have to like homebrew the race with Mike or whoever is the DM next time if Chaffinch survives to the end of this campaign, where he's just like, he's half fairy. He's called like Oberon Jenkins or Oberon Boba or something like that.
Nice reference there, bro. I appreciate that.
And like he's just a massive douchebag. Like he's a private eye and he goes around and he's not a private eye out of any sort of sense of service. He just loves just messy information. And like he'd speak in like a typical like we gotta get in the car, see, that type voice. And he'd like just be an absolute cock to everyone. He's like say if he arrived on a scene where like somebody had been killed, he'd like go up to like the local farm like, hey, what's going on over here, boy? Are these your apples? And like push the apples out of his hand and be like, pick up your apples, man. What happened here, buddy? Do you know anything about this murder?
Would you lean into like the gritty noir style detective?
That's exactly the type. But like he's a massive dick. He'll get beaten up by everyone. He'll not be physically strong. He'll just be just a shit. And like he'd be like, I don't know if anyone of you watched, but I'll bring it back to wrestling vaguely. But did anyone watch this year's SummerSlam?
I did.
You know when Goldberg beat Dolph Ziggler in like a minute? And then he goes up the ramp. Dolph Ziggler's like, you coward, and you couldn't defeat me man to man. Comes down, spears him again. Then he's like, anyone could get lucky twice. Like, I wanted to be that type of character. Just like somebody who's just an unrepentant dick. I don't think he'd last that long. But I just think he'd be hilarious just to play that kind of just shit that everyone wants to punch in the face. I guess, like, to a certain extent, Devin was sort of like that in flashes. But... which is kind of sort of the, like, some of the inspiration, because I like the way Devin played sometimes, like how he was, like, a little bit of a shit to people. But I wanted to be someone who's so overtly just a slimy, just terrible person that, like, everyone will be exasperated. Friends, enemies, rulers, even bandits probably were like, I'm a dick, but not that much of a dick. Just someone who's entirely out for themselves. Like, he's not particularly evil, he just only cares about himself.
Lean into that phrase, if he had brains he'd be dangerous,
yeah,
kind of deal.
Sort of like if Nyx didn't care about anything other than, I know he doesn't care about anything but money, but like you can tell that Nix is a fully formed person. Like there's a reason he's like that. But like this dude would just be an unrepenting douchebag. Like he'd probably been a bully his entire life. Like just a cock. I just love to play a character like that. My second idea for a character is based on something that I read in J.R. Tolkien's The Silmarillion. So the first few chapters are about like the gods and like how they form the world, and like how some gods are evil, some gods aren't. And apparently one of the good guys, I say in quotation marks, is a storm god who lives on the coast and murders people for fun by creating storms every now and then. And like he gets told off every now and then. He's like, "Could you stop doing that, please?" By like, because there's like god of the sea and the god of storms. I think the god of the sea has precedent over him, so he's like, "Could you stop doing that?" Like, all right, and he calms down, but he's still like a little bit sadistic. So I can't remember what it was exactly. I got them bookmarked. But there is a cleric school that deals with thunder, and you can fly with it. And so I was gonna make sort of like a fighter, like floaty cleric dude who is basically just an analog to Thor, but just like he believes himself to be a god and he doesn't care about like the concerns of mortals. And the only reason he'd like come along, like sort of like classic Hercules mentality, the only reason he'd go along with a party is so he can like slay big monsters and just like add to his own fame type thing.
Like build up his ego.
Yeah, so he'd be just like this unrepentant, just lightning slinging, egotistical person who doesn't care about anything the party cares about because he believes he's above them. And like anything, like say if he was part of the party now and we're going through the Chaffinch's storyline, he would, even though like Chaffinch is a real, like, well, he's not human, but he's a very human character, he's going through real things, like this dude, this storm god guy, would find it entirely hilarious that all these things have affected this kid, because he's like, they're just like mortals. They would have, like, I've like had several mortal friends like over the years who just died and I don't care type thing. So it's like someone who's like really, obviously not god mod level powerful. I'm not going to hijack a campaign by someone who can defeat everyone, but someone who at least believes himself to be that powerful, that they're above everything,
like removed from like pleb problems. Yeah.
So I think that would be hilarious, because being a sociopath in real life, I'd love to.
Sometimes you got to work through that shit in a safe, controlled way.
I am a living god.
In the game.
Billy, give me your money. In the game. But yeah, that's my only two ideas. I think if, like we touched on it earlier when we were talking about Flobbert, I think if Chaffinch dies before the end of this campaign, I'll either have Flobbert take his place or Starling as a little brother. Starling I don't think would be able to help at all, but I just think he's a hilarious character. Just like the fact that he's so bad at magic, he has to write his spells on his shield, and the fact that he's a sorcerer and like one bad roll he could explode the entire party and himself is so hilarious to me, because all of his fighter things deal with protecting people. So like he'll spend like a couple of sessions protecting people and then ignite a level 7 fireball on his own head and kill everyone.
Oh man, I was gonna say he held his own in that one shot that you run where you NPC'd him.
Yeah, he's really cool.
I really love the idea of playing like the Terry and Derrington, where you're underleveled compared to the rest of the party, but just trying to do your best. Like,
but yeah, that's my characters.
It's good stuff. We had a good chat. We learned some things, had some laughs.
We did, and then
big bands.
Yeah, all the bands. Well, yeah, that's it for another episode of.
Thanks for coming on our show, Gary.
This is my show, goddamn.